Yo, what is up, guys? I'm Hesam here. In this tutorial, we're going to talk about variables and mutability. As we saw in the last video, we can define variables using the let keyword. For example, we can say let x equals 5, and here we have a new variable with the name of x. Let's print this variable now. So basically, we save the number 5 in the x variable, and we replace it here. Let's run the program. Here you can see the value is 5. So when you define a variable in the Rust programming language, the value of variable is immutable. It means you can't change the value of the variable later. For example, if I change the value of variable to 6, we can see here we got some error that says we can't assign twice to a variable. But anyway, let's try to print the value again and run our program. So here we can see the same error. But what if we want to change the value later? As we saw in the previous episode, we can add the mute or mut keyword here. It will make our variable mutable, so we can change it later. And now if I run the same program, we can see we can now modify the value of the x variable. So basically, if we use let, we have an immutable variable, and if we use let mute, we have a mutable variable. And there is a const in Rust that we can define a variable that will initialize in the scope that we defined it, and it will never change in the lifetime of its scope. So for example, if we define a const variable here, we want to save the amount of seconds in 3 hours. We should define the type of the variable. For example, here we use u32 because we want to save a number, and we have 60 seconds in a minute, and every hour is 60 minutes, and we want 3 hours of this second. So basically, we have the amount of seconds in 3 hours in this constant. And here, let me show you the value here. Now we can run our program and see the value of our constant. So we can't change this constant in its lifetime, and basically it's something that we use for values that are never going to change in our program. And another thing that you can use in Rust is redefining variables. For example, here you can see we can't change the value of x, but we can redefine it again. And here you see now the error is gone, and if I run the program, you can see the code is now working, but we have some warnings here about this constant. Let me clear this constant, and you can see our code is now working because here we are defining another x, which is different from this x here on top. This is perfectly valid in Rust, and we can use it in our source code to redefine variables. And also we can change the type of these variables. We're going to see this soon, but we can also use this previous variable here. For example, we can say x plus 1, which means we take the value of x from here, which is 5, and add 1 to it, so this x becomes 6. For example, here we can see the redefinition works perfectly here. And another thing that I want to show you here is shadowing. In Rust, we have scopes that we show using these curly braces. Uh, so we can have new variables in new scopes. We can create simple scope using curly braces here. For example, here I can create new scope which is different from the upper scope here, and I can create another variable here. For example, let x equals x multiply 2, and here this x is different from this x. uh, this x is only valid here, and let me take out this and place it here, and say we are in the inner scope. So here, basically, we only have one x in this scope, only one x which is defined in this scope, uh, but we can access the outer scope access. Uh, so here basically we do this, and we get the value of outer x, which is 6 here, and use it to create our own x in this scope. So this x will shadow this x, and we can't use the outer scope x after this line. So here we are pointing at this x, which is for our current scope. But after the end of this scope, we used x again, but this x is not going to refer to this x, which is here 12. This x going to refer to this x here, which is 6. So if we run the program, this line should be 12, because 6 times 2 is 12, and we use this x here, but this x should be 6, because we use the same scope x. Okay, let's run the project. You can here see 12 and 6 is printed in the results. So basically, scopes are very important in the Rust. Let me show you another example. If I create a variable named y, and uh, let's assign some number to it and print it here. I can use y here till the end of this scope, but I can't use the y here. If I run the project, I should get an error here. So you can see the error of Rust compiler. It can't find the y in this scope, because in this scope we have no y variable here, and the y is only available in the inner scope here. So scopes are very important in Rust, and they are very clear in my opinion. We can use them to organize our source code. And one last thing that I want to show you here is redefining variables, but changing their types. For example, here we use the type of I32, but I can change the type of x to something else. For example, I can uh, change the type to a string, and here you can see it's perfectly valid. And if I run the program, here you can see we now have hello. This is a string, and the previous type was integer, which is totally different. But this is totally valid in Rust, and we can use this. So basically, we can redefine our variables here, but also we can change the uh, type of our variables. Let me show you another example here. I can change the spaces variable to another type here. I can use spaces itself to create another variable, or excuse me, redefine the space. And here you can see the type is usize, and I can print the variable here. Here, if you see, you can see the 5, which is the length of this string. But something that I want to mention here is you can't change the type of the mutable variables. Here, if I change the type of spaces from a mutable, sorry, an immutable variable to a mutable variable, and I remove the redefinition, here you can see I cannot change the type of variable. If the type of a variable is string, we should change its value to another string. We can't use something else to change the type of a variable. If I run the code, you can here see it expected the str value type, but it got a usize. So basically, redefinition is different in some ways with the mutable variables. Although in both of them we can change the value of the variable, but we cannot change the type of variables in the mutable variables. But we can change the type of variables when redefining them. So that's it for this video. I hope you enjoy this video. Please consider liking and subscribing to our channel. And thanks for watching. See you in the next one.